Hello, welcome to another video on our channel. Here we translate testimonies from people who have had near-death experiences and other spiritual experiences. Today, let's learn the story of Thorn Hawthorne. He says that he was struck by lightning and went to the celestial kingdom, where he saw the end of the world and great catastrophes. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now. Leave a comment with your name and city. Let us now hear Thorn's testimony. My name is Thorn Hawthorne, and I have a story to tell that has completely changed my perspective on life, death, and everything in between. If you met me today, you would probably see me as an ordinary man, perhaps a little distracted, working in my little woodworking shop in Silver Pines. But behind this simple appearance, I carry with me an extraordinary experience that challenged everything I thought I knew about our existence. I was born and raised in Silver Pines, a quiet little town surrounded by the silver pine forests that give the place its name. Since I was young, I have always been fascinated by the art of carpentry, inherited from my father. I spent years honing my skills, finding comfort in the aroma of freshly cut wood and the satisfaction of transforming a rough piece of tree into something beautiful and useful. My life was relatively ordinary until that fateful day in 2005. I was 35 at the time, living alone in a modest house on the outskirts of town, and my days were divided between working in the workshop and hiking in the forest. I've never been a particularly religious or spiritual person. I believed in God, yes, but in a distant way, without much conviction or involvement. I lost my siblings when I was very young. Grace passed away at 12 due to a rare disease, and Michael, well, he wasn't even a year old. These losses deeply affected my family, and for a long time, I carried with me a weight of sadness and unanswered questions. I never imagined that one day I would have the answers I was looking for, much less in the way they came. The experience I'm about to share with you began on a day like any other, but ended up being the turning point of my entire existence. Before I continue, I want to make it clear that I understand how unbelievable this story may seem. If I myself had heard something like that before experiencing it, I would probably have my doubts. But I ask that you listen with an open mind and heart. What I experienced that day goes beyond our everyday understanding, touching aspects of existence that many of us do not even suspect exist. This is the story of how a near-fatal accident led me on a journey into what I can only describe as the spiritual realm. It is a story of pain, fear, but also of unconditional love, divine wisdom, and profound personal transformation. It's the story of how I died, saw what lies beyond this life, and came back to tell everyone. It was a summer afternoon in Silver Pines, but the sky didn't reflect the time of year. Dark, heavy clouds gathered on the horizon, promising a ferocious storm. I was at home on the back porch, watching the storm approach. I have always enjoyed seeing nature in its most raw and powerful form, and that day was no exception. The wind began to blow strongly, making the trees in the nearby forest dance violently. The air was charged with electricity, and I could feel the tension building around me. It was at that moment that the phone rang. It was my mother, worried about the approaching storm. Normally, I wouldn't answer the phone during a thunderstorm, let alone use a cordless phone. But that day, for some reason I can't explain, I ignored my instincts. While talking to my mother, trying to calm her down, I saw an intense flash. It was as if the sky itself had split in half. The deafening sound of thunder came almost instantly, so loud it hurt my ears. And then, before I could process what was happening, I felt like my entire body was on fire. The pain was indescribable. Every nerve in my body felt like it was screaming in agony. I felt like I was being ripped from the inside out, every cell of my being exploding simultaneously. My muscles contracted violently, and I lost control over my own body. The phone fell out of my hands, and I collapsed on the porch floor. For a moment, everything went black. The pain was so intense that my mind just shut down. I don't know how long I stayed like that. It could have been seconds or hours. When I finally regained consciousness, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The storm continued outside. I could see the lightning lighting up the sky, but I couldn't hear anything. It was as if someone had muted the entire world. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I started to panic. It was then that I realized something strange. I could see myself. Not like in a mirror, but from above, as if I were floating above my own body. I found myself lying on the porch floor, the phone just inches from my limp hand. Burn marks ran down my right arm, and a little smoke was still coming out of my singed clothing. At that moment, I didn't understand what was happening. It didn't occur to me that I might be dead or having an out-of-body experience. Everything seemed so real, so vivid, that my mind couldn't process the situation. I tried to call for help, but no sound came out of my mouth, or rather, from the mouth of my body lying on the ground. It was then that I noticed a soft light around me. It wasn't coming from any specific place. It was as if the air itself was glowing, and with that light came a sense of peace that I had never experienced before. All the pain, all the fear, just disappeared. I felt light, almost floating. I looked again at my body on the floor and, for the first time, I understood. I had died. Or at least, that's what I thought at that moment. Strangely, this realization didn't scare me. On the contrary, I felt a growing curiosity. If I was dead, what would come next? Little did I know that question was about to be answered in a way that would forever change my understanding of life, death, and everything that lies beyond. As I watched my limp body on the porch floor, I felt a sudden change around me. The soft light surrounding me began to intensify, and I felt like I was being gently pulled away from the scene of the accident. There was no fear, just a quiet curiosity and a deep peace that I had never experienced before. As I walked away, I saw my house falling behind, shrinking into a tiny speck amidst the storm that continued to rage. But the strangest thing was that although I could see the rain and the lightning, I didn't feel any of it. It was like watching a silent movie, where I could see the action but was completely disconnected from it. Suddenly, I found myself surrounded by a tunnel of light. It was not a blinding or uncomfortable light, but rather welcoming and comforting. The walls of the tunnel seemed to be made of thousands of small points of light, like very close stars. I felt myself floating through this tunnel, moving at a speed that should have been frightening but that, strangely enough, felt natural and peaceful. As I traveled through this tunnel of light, I began to hear sounds. At first, it was just distant murmurs, as if someone was talking in a room next door. But little by little, the sounds became clearer. I recognized familiar voices. My mother, my father, my deceased brothers. I couldn't see anyone, but I could feel their presence around me, comforting and loving. The tunnel seemed to have no end, but I didn't feel anxious or impatient. I was in a state of pure acceptance, as if I intuitively knew I was going exactly where I was supposed to go. Time seemed to not exist in this place. It could have been seconds or centuries, I couldn't say. Finally, I realized that the tunnel was coming to an end. The light in front of me grew brighter, but not unpleasantly so. It was as if I was preparing myself for what came next. I felt a wave of expectation, mixed with a deep peace. When I emerged from the tunnel, I was momentarily dazzled. Before me stretched a landscape of indescribable beauty. It was a garden, but a garden like no other I had ever seen on Earth. The colors were more vibrant than anything I had ever experienced. Flowers of all types and sizes spread as far as the eye could see, their petals shining with a light of their own. The sky above was not blue, but rather a soft mix of golden and pink tones, like an eternal sunset. Majestic trees stood here and there, their leaves whispering a soft melody that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The air was pure and invigorating, filled with fragrances that reminded me of all the happy moments in my life. Every breath, if I was still breathing, seemed to fill me with energy and well-being. I took a step forward, marveling at everything around me. It was then that I noticed that my body, or whatever form I now inhabited, seemed to be made of light. I was weightless, I didn't feel tired or uncomfortable. It was as if all the physical limitations he knew had simply disappeared. As I took in all this beauty, I felt a presence beside me. I turned around and saw two figures approaching. My heart, or whatever I had in this new state, seemed to leap. They were Grace and Michael, my deceased brothers. Grace, who died aged 12, now looked like a radiant young woman, her smile lighting up the entire garden. Michael, who never lived a year on Earth, was now a young adult full of vitality and peace. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. I could feel your love and your joy in seeing me. I hugged them, and in that moment, I felt like all the pieces of the puzzle of my life finally fell into place. All the pain of loss, all the sadness I carried for years, simply dissolved in that hug. As we hugged, I was sure I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in my life, or death, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I was ready to discover the mysteries of this new kingdom, guided by the love of my brothers and the indescribable beauty that surrounded me. After the emotional reunion with my brothers, Grace and Michael led me deeper into the heavenly garden. As we walked, or rather, floated, through the indescribably beautiful scenery, I began to notice other presences around us. They were beings of light, just as we had become, but with an even more intense luminosity. These beings did not have a defined physical form as we are used to seeing. They were more like pulsating energy fields, each with its own unique color and vibration. Some were golden, others bluish, and there were those that seemed to contain all the colors of the rainbow at the same time. It was as if he was seeing the very essence of each being, free from the limitations of a physical body. As we got closer, I could feel waves of love and understanding emanating from these beings. There was no need for words. Communication happened on a much deeper level, through thoughts and feelings. It was as if we could share not just ideas, but entire experiences in a matter of seconds. One of the light beings approached me. His presence was so welcoming and comforting that I felt immediately at ease. Without using words, he conveyed to me that he was my spiritual guide, an entity that had accompanied me throughout my earthly existence, even if I was not aware of it. Through this telepathic communication, my guide began to show me aspects of my life that I had never considered before. I saw moments from my past, not just important events, but also small gestures and seemingly insignificant decisions. To my surprise, I could see how each of these actions had repercussions far beyond what I could have imagined. A simple smile I gave to a stranger on the street turned into a wave of kindness that affected dozens of people. A word of encouragement I offered a friend during a difficult time changed the course of his life in ways I never could have predicted. It was as if every action, every thought, was a stone thrown into a lake, creating waves that spread infinitely. At the same time, I saw times when I was selfish or uncaring, and I could feel the pain I caused others. But there was no judgment in this review, just a deep understanding and an opportunity to learn. My guide showed me that every experience, positive or negative, was an essential part of my journey of spiritual growth. As I absorbed these revelations, other beings of light joined us. Each of them seemed to represent a different aspect of existence. There were beings who emanated wisdom, others who radiated compassion, and some whose presence conveyed a sense of absolute peace. It was like being in the presence of ancient masters, each with profound lessons to share. One of the beings, whose light was a deep, calming blue, approached and began to show me visions of the universe. I saw galaxies forming, stars being born and dying, planets evolving over billions of years. I understood that life, in all its forms, was an expression of universal consciousness, and that every being, from the smallest particle to the largest galaxy, was interconnected in a cosmic web of energy and information. Another being, which glowed a vibrant green, revealed to me the mysteries of nature. I saw how every plant, every animal, Every ecosystem on Earth was part of an elaborate system of balance and harmony. I understood the importance of respecting and protecting the environment, not only for the good of the planet, but as an extension of our own spiritual being. A third being, radiant in shades of gold, showed me the power of unconditional love. I experienced a love so pure and intense that it seemed to fill every fiber of my being. It was a love that transcended anything I had ever felt on Earth, a love that made no distinctions and embraced all of creation. At that moment, I understood that this love was the most powerful force in the universe, capable of healing, transforming, and creating. As I interacted with these beings of light, I felt my consciousness expanding. It was as if veils were being removed from my eyes, allowing me to see and understand aspects of reality that had previously been hidden. I began to realize that what we call reality on Earth is just a tiny fraction of a much vaster and more complex existence. The beings of light showed me that death, as we understand it on Earth, is just a transition. Our true essence, our soul, is eternal and indestructible. I learned that we came to Earth as incarnated souls to learn, grow, and evolve spiritually. Each life is an opportunity to experience, to make choices, and to understand more deeply the nature of love and compassion. As I absorbed these lessons, I felt a deep gratitude for this experience. I realized that I was being gifted with knowledge that few have the opportunity to receive while they are still incarnated. At the same time, I felt a growing responsibility. I knew that if I returned to my earthly life, I would have a duty to share these truths with others. My guide, sensing my thoughts, assured me that I would not be alone on this mission. He and the other beings of light would always be with me, guiding and inspiring, even if I could not see or hear them clearly on the physical plane. As I reflected on everything I had learned, I felt a subtle shift around me. The heavenly garden began to shine even more brightly, and a new presence made itself felt. It was a presence so powerful, so loving, that it made all previous experiences seem pale in comparison. Instinctively, I knew I was about to have an encounter that would change everything, an encounter with the very source of creation. As the presence intensified, the scenery around me began to transform. The heavenly garden, with all its indescribable beauty, seemed to dissolve into pure light. It was as if he was being transported to the heart of the universe itself. The light around me was not blinding or uncomfortable. On the contrary, it was welcoming, enveloping, like a hug that enveloped not just my being, but my entire existence. At that moment, I understood that I was in the presence of what many would call God, but who I can only describe as the source of all creation. There was no defined form, no anthropomorphic figure as we often imagine. It was more like a field of pure energy, infinitely vast and at the same time intimately close. The feeling was of being immersed in an ocean of unconditional love, infinite wisdom, and unlimited creative power. Communication with this source did not happen through words, but through direct and immediate understanding. Each thought was a complete revelation, a total experience that involved knowledge, emotion, and understanding in a single instant. The first thing I understood was the interconnected nature of all existence. I saw that everything, every being, every particle, every thought was intrinsically linked to this divine source. There was no real separation between the creator and the creation. We were all individualized expressions of this universal consciousness, like waves in a vast ocean. I understood that the fundamental purpose of existence was the expansion of consciousness through experience. Every life, every choice, every interaction contributed to this expansion. There were no real mistakes, just opportunities to learn and grow. Source showed me that love, not the romantic or conditional love we know on Earth, but pure, unconditional love, was the most powerful force in the universe. It was the fabric that held all creation together, the energy that drove evolution and growth. I experienced a sense of oneness with all creation that defied description. For a moment, I was everything and everyone at once. I felt the joy of a child being born, the pain of someone losing a loved one, the beauty of a sunset, the vastness of the cosmos. It was overwhelming and, at the same time, deeply liberating. Source showed me that time, as we understand it, is an illusion. I saw past, present, and future coexisting simultaneously. I realized that our earthly lives are like chapters in a huge book. We can focus on one chapter at a time, but they all exist simultaneously. I understood that death, as we fear it on earth, does not exist. It's just a transition, a change of state. Our essence, our consciousness, is eternal and indestructible. We come to earth to learn, to experience, to grow, but our true nature is as vast and eternal as the universe itself. Source revealed to me that each of us has a unique purpose in the great tapestry of existence. There are no insignificant or meaningless lives. Every experience, every interaction, every choice contributes to the expansion of universal consciousness. I understood that free will is a sacred gift. The Source does not directly interfere in our choices, but is always present, subtly guiding, offering opportunities for growth and evolution. I understood that even the most difficult and painful experiences have a greater purpose in our spiritual journey. Source showed me that the universe is fundamentally benevolent. There is no eternal punishment or condemnation. There is only love, learning, and continuous evolution. Every soul eventually finds its way back to the light, no matter how long it takes. As I absorbed these cosmic truths, I felt an expansion of my own consciousness. It was as if veils were being removed, allowing me to see and understand aspects of reality that had previously been hidden. I realized that what we call a reality on Earth is just a tiny fraction of a much vaster and more wonderful existence. In the midst of this transcendental experience, I felt a question arise from the depths of my being. Why me? Why was I granted this vision? The answer came not in words, but in a deep understanding. Each of us has the potential to access this divine wisdom. My experience was not an exclusive privilege, but a reminder of the divine potential that exists in every being. As the intensity of the experience began to subside, I felt a deep gratitude and, at the same time, an immense responsibility. I knew that if I returned to my earthly life, I would have a mission to share these truths, to be a beacon of light and love for others. The Source's presence began to soften, but before it withdrew completely, I felt one last thought being conveyed. Remember, you are never alone. I am always with you, in you and around you. You are loved beyond your understanding. With these words reverberating through my being, I felt myself being gently guided back to the heavenly garden. I knew my journey wasn't over yet. There was more to learn, more to experience before I could return to my earthly life, if I returned at all. But now, I carried with me an understanding that had completely transformed my perception of reality and my place in the universe. As I returned to the heavenly garden, I felt deeply transformed by my experience with Divine Source. It was as if every fiber of my being had been reconfigured, tuned to a higher frequency of consciousness. The beings of light awaiting me seemed to notice this change, and their smiles, or what I interpreted as smiles in their ethereal forms, radiated approval and encouragement. My spirit guide approached again, his presence bringing a sense of familiarity and comfort after the intensity of the encounter with Source. Without words, he conveyed to me that the time had come to deepen my understanding, to receive lessons that would help me not only on my personal journey, but that could benefit others if I returned to the earthly plane. The first lesson I received was about the nature of time. I saw that, from the point of view of the spirit, past or present and future coexist simultaneously. Our earthly lives are like beads on a necklace. We can focus on one bead at a time, but they all exist at the same time. This perspective made me understand the importance of living fully in the present, knowing that each moment contains the full potential of the universe. I then learned about the law of karma, but in a very different way than it is generally understood on Earth. It was not about punishment or reward, but rather a natural mechanism of balance and learning. Every action, every thought, creates waves of energy that eventually return to us, not as punishment, but as opportunities for growth and understanding. One of the most profound lessons was about the nature of forgiveness. I saw that holding resentments and hurts was like carrying heavy stones unnecessarily. Forgiveness, I learned, is not something we do for others, but for ourselves. It is an act of liberation that allows us to move forward on our spiritual journey. I learned about the importance of unconditional love. I saw that love, in its purest form, does not judge, does not demand, does not impose conditions. It is a force that accepts, that nourishes, that allows growth. I understood that practicing this type of love, not only with others, but also with ourselves, is one of the most powerful ways to raise our consciousness and contribute to the harmony of the universe. Another fundamental lesson was about the nature of reality. I learned that the physical world we experience is just a small fraction of a much vaster, multidimensional reality. Our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs have a direct impact on the way we perceive and interact with this reality. I realized that we have much more power to shape our experiences than we often believe. I was educated on the importance of balance. I saw that the duality we experience on Earth, light and dark, joy and sadness, expansion and contraction, is part of a larger system of cosmic harmony. Every experience, no matter how challenging it may seem, has a purpose in our journey of spiritual growth. I learned about the cyclical nature of existence. I saw that life and death are parts of a continuous cycle of renewal and transformation. Death, as we understand it on Earth, is just a transition, a change of state. Our essence, our consciousness, continues to evolve and expand beyond the limits of the physical body. One particularly impactful lesson was about the interconnectedness of all things. I saw that every thought, every action, no matter how small, has an effect on the whole. I understood that we are not separate from each other or the universe. We are all part of a vast web of consciousness, each of us a unique expression of the whole. I learned about the power of gratitude. I saw that cultivating a state of gratitude not only raises our own vibration, but also opens doors to more positive and enriching experiences. Gratitude, I understand, is a way of recognizing and honoring the abundance that already exists in our lives. Finally, I received a lesson about the purpose of life. I understood that we did not come to Earth to achieve some specific goal and then leave. Instead, we are here to experience, to grow, to expand our consciousness. Each life is a unique opportunity for learning and evolution. As I absorbed these profound lessons, I felt my consciousness expanding even further. It was as if each new understanding opened doors to even deeper levels of wisdom and understanding. I realized that spiritual learning is an infinite process. There is no endpoint, just continuous evolution. My spiritual guide, realizing the magnitude of what I was experiencing, gently reminded me that although these truths were universal, the way each individual understands and applies them is unique. He encouraged me to not just memorize these lessons, but to integrate them deeply into my being, allowing them to transform not only my understanding, but also the way I live and interact with the world. As I reflected on all I had learned, I felt a wave of love and gratitude so intense that it seemed to radiate from every part of my being. Tears, if I could still cry in this ethereal form, seemed to flow, not from sadness, but from a joy and peace that transcended anything I had ever experienced. It was in this moment of deep emotion and clarity that my guide presented me with a choice that I did not expect to have to make so soon. With a gentle gesture, my spiritual guide invited me to follow him. We floated through the celestial garden until we arrived at a place that seemed to be the meeting point between two worlds. On one side, I could see the vastness of the spiritual realm, with its vibrant colors and pulsing energy of love and wisdom. On the other, I perceived a kind of translucent veil through which I could glimpse, albeit in a nebulous way, the physical world that I had left behind. My guide then turned to me, his energy radiating compassion and seriousness. Without using words, but through direct mind-to-mind communication, he presented me with a choice I never imagined I would have to make. "Thorn," he began, "you have reached a pivotal point in your journey. The experiences you have had here, the lessons you have learned, have profoundly transformed your soul. Now, you are faced with two choices. He paused, allowing me to absorb the weight of the moment before continuing. Your first option is to remain here, in the spiritual realm. If you choose this path, you will continue your spiritual evolution on this side of the veil. You will be able to further deepen your understanding of cosmic truths, help other souls on their journey, and contribute to the harmony of the universe in ways that go beyond earthly understanding. I felt a wave of emotion go through me as I considered this possibility. The idea of remaining in this place of peace, love, and wisdom was incredibly tempting. Here I was free from the limitations and sufferings of the physical world. Here I could experience a direct and constant connection with Divine Source. But before I could get too attached to this idea, my guide continued. Your second option is to return to the earthly plane. If you choose this path, you will take with you the lessons you learned here, although the intensity of these memories may be dampened by the limitations of the physical brain. Your mission would be to live these truths, to share your experience with others and be a beacon of light in a world that often seems to be shrouded in darkness. This option filled me with a mix of apprehension and purpose. Returning would mean facing the difficulties and challenges of earthly life again. It would mean feeling pain, experiencing limitations, perhaps even facing skepticism and misunderstanding from others. But it would also mean having the opportunity to make a tangible difference, to touch lives in a unique and personal way. My guide, sensing my indecision, added, "There is no wrong choice, Thorn. Both paths lead to growth and evolution. The question is, where do you feel you can best serve at this time?" I was silent for a long time, pondering deeply. I thought about everything I had experienced, the truths I had learned. I thought about the people I had left behind, my family, my friends, my community. I thought about the transformative potential that my experience could bring if I shared it with the world. Finally, I looked at my guide and, with a mixture of determination and humility, made my choice. "I want to return," I said, my voice, or whatever it was in that non-physical form, shaking slightly. There is so much suffering, so much confusion in the world. If I can make even a small difference, if I can bring some of the light and love that I've experienced here to Earth, then I feel like that's what I'm meant to do. My guide smiled, his energy radiating approval and love. "A brave choice, Thorn. Know that although you are returning to the physical plane, you will never be truly separated from this place or from us. We will always be with you, guiding and supporting, even if you cannot always perceive us clearly." He then approached, enveloping me in a hug of pure energy and light. I felt like all the love and wisdom in the universe was being poured into me, preparing me for the journey home. "Remember," he said, his voice echoing in my consciousness, "you are returning not just with knowledge, but with a mission. Live the love you experienced here, be the change you want to see in the world, and most of all, never forget who you truly are, an eternal, beloved expression of Divine Source." With these words reverberating through my being, I felt myself being gently guided towards the veil that separated the worlds. As I got closer, the spiritual world began to dissolve around me. The last thing I saw before passing through the veil was my guide's radiant smile and the infinite light of the celestial realm. And then, everything went dark. The darkness that enveloped me after crossing the veil was brief but intense. It was as if I were falling through empty space, slowly losing the expanded consciousness I had experienced in the spiritual realm. I felt like I was being squeezed, like I was being forced back into a container too small to contain everything I had become. Suddenly, I was flooded with physical sensations. The first thing I noticed was pain, a sharp, pulsing pain that seemed to course through my entire body. My lungs burned as if I hadn't been breathing for a long time. I heard distant, muffled sounds that gradually became clearer, urgent voices, the beeping of machines, the sound of hurried footsteps. Slowly, with an effort that seemed superhuman, I opened my eyes. The light was blinding, and for a moment I thought I was still in the celestial realm. But as my vision adjusted, I realized I was in a hospital room. Blurred figures moved around me, and I could make out the white coats of the doctors and nurses. "He's coming back," I heard someone exclaim. "Mr. Hawthorne, can you hear me? Blink twice if you can understand me." With difficulty, I forced my eyes to blink twice. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. In the minutes and hours that followed, I was subjected to a series of examinations and tests. The doctors were amazed. I had been technically dead for several minutes, and yet, here I was, conscious and responsive. The burn marks left by the lightning were evident on my arm and chest, but the internal damage was surprisingly less than they expected. While the doctors worked, I struggled to hold on to my memories on the other side. It was like trying to hold water in my hands. The harder I tried to retain the details, the more they seemed to slip out. The intensity of the experience, the clarity of the lessons learned, all seemed to be fading into the fog of physical consciousness. In the days that followed, as I recovered in the hospital, I went through a roller coaster of emotions. On the one hand, I was deeply grateful to have survived and to have had the opportunity to return. On the other hand, he felt an overwhelming sadness and nostalgia for the heavenly kingdom he had left behind. My family and friends came to visit, their expressions a mix of relief, concern, and curiosity. They wanted to know what had happened, if I had felt or seen anything while I was dead. I wanted to tell everything, share the beauty and wisdom I had experienced, but words seemed inadequate, insufficient to describe the magnitude of what I had experienced. As my physical strength returned, I began to notice subtle changes in myself. Colors seemed more vibrant, sounds clearer. I found myself crying easily, not from sadness, but from a deep appreciation for the beauty of the world around me. I felt a connection to people that I had never experienced before, as if I could see beyond their physical appearances and touch their souls. But not everything was easy. Along with this new sensitivity came a sense of dislocation. The world I knew before now seemed strange. Were concerned about my mental state. They spoke of hallucinations caused by lack of oxygen and post-traumatic stress. They suggested therapy and even medication to help readjust my perception of reality. But I knew, deep down in my being, that what I had experienced was real. More real, in fact, than anything I had ever experienced on the physical plane. The challenge now was to find a way to integrate this transcendental experience with the everyday reality I had returned to. At night, alone in the hospital room, I would close my eyes and try to reconnect with that sense of peace and unconditional love that I had experienced on the other side. Sometimes I could feel an echo of that connection, as if the veil between the worlds was momentarily thinning. It was during one of these nights of silent reflection that I made a decision. I had chosen to return for a reason. He had a mission to accomplish. It wouldn't be easy. I knew I would face skepticism, misunderstanding, and even ridicule. But I also knew that if I could help even one person glimpse the greater truth that I had experienced, it would have been worth it. As sleep enveloped me, I felt a deep peace settle in my heart. I was back, transformed and with a purpose. The journey that awaited me would be challenging, but I was not alone. The lessons from beyond were engraved in my soul, and I was determined to live and share them, one day at a time. In the weeks that followed my release from the hospital, I immersed myself in an intense process of readjustment and reflection. The world around me looked the same, but my perception of it had changed drastically. It was as if I was seeing everything through a new lens, one that revealed layers of reality that had previously been hidden from me. One of the most significant changes was my relationship with time. Before the accident, I was always running around, anxious about the future or stuck with regrets from the past. Now I found myself deeply present in each moment. Every breath, every heartbeat, became a precious reminder of the gift of life. My perception of nature has also transformed. I spent hours simply watching the movement of leaves in the wind, marveling at the complexity and beauty of each plant. each insect, each cloud in the sky. Everything seemed to vibrate with a vital energy that I could almost touch. Interpersonal relationships gained a new dimension. I found myself looking into people's eyes, really looking, and seeing beyond the masks we all wear. I could feel their joys, their fears, their hopes. This new empathy was sometimes overwhelming, but also incredibly enriching. My relationship with work and material possessions has also undergone a radical change. The never-ending quest for success and accumulation, which once guided many of my decisions, now felt empty and meaningless. I began to question the purpose of each activity, each purchase, each choice. Does this contribute to my spiritual growth? Does this help make the world a better place? One of the most profound lessons I brought with me was the understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. I began to see how every action, every word, every thought created waves that spread far beyond what I could imagine. This led me to a new life ethic, based on awareness and responsibility for every choice I made. I began meditating regularly, seeking to reconnect with that sense of peace and unity I had experienced on the other side. Sometimes during these meditations, I felt as if the veil between the worlds became thinner, and I could almost hear the whispers of my spirit guides. My relationship with death has also completely changed. The fear that once paralyzed me at the thought of the end of life was replaced by a serene understanding that death is just a transition, a passage to another state of being. This didn't mean I didn't value life. On the contrary, every moment became even more precious, knowing it was a unique opportunity for growth and experience. However, not everything was easy in this new life. Many people around me had difficulty understanding the changes I was going through. Longtime friends moved away, uncomfortable with my new way of seeing the world. Family members expressed concern, fearing that I was suffering from some type of post-accident psychological trauma. The biggest challenges came when I tried to share my experience. Some people reacted with skepticism, others with fear, and some even with hostility. I quickly learned that not everyone was ready or willing to hear about realities beyond the physical world. But for every person who walked away, another seemed to be drawn to the light I now knew I carried within me. I began to receive visits from strangers who had heard about my experience and were seeking comfort, guidance, or simply an opportunity to talk about their own spiritual experiences that they feared sharing with others. My work as a carpenter also underwent a transformation. Before, I saw wood as just a material to be shaped. Now I perceived it as a living expression of nature, with its own essence and energy. Each piece I created became a meditation, a way of honoring the beauty and wisdom inherent in creation. Over time, I started writing about my experience. At first, it was just for myself, a way to process and preserve memories that sometimes felt so ethereal. But as the pages piled up, I realized I had something important to share with the world. I decided to organize discussion groups in my community, offering a safe space for people to explore questions of spirituality, the afterlife, and the purpose of existence. These gatherings started small but soon grew, attracting people of all ages and backgrounds. One of the most important lessons I learned was about the power of unconditional love. I began to actively practice love and compassion in all my interactions, even, and especially, with those who treated me with skepticism or hostility. It was surprising to see how this approach could disarm even the staunchest critics. As the months turned into years, I felt like I was slowly fulfilling the purpose for which I had chosen to return. It wasn't a grand or dramatic mission, but a series of small moments, conversations, and actions that I hope helped bring a little more light and understanding to the world. There were moments of doubt, of course, times when the density of the physical world felt overwhelming, when I longed for the peace and clarity I had experienced on the other side. But in those moments, I remembered my spirit guide's words, "You are never truly separate from this place or us." And so, day after day, I continued my journey, living each moment with gratitude, seeking to see the divine in every person and everything, and doing my best to be a beacon of light in a world that often seems shrouded in darkness. My name is Thorn Hawthorne, and this is my story, the story of how I died, saw what lies beyond this life, and returned to share what I learned. I don't know how much longer I will have on this earth, but I know that every moment is a precious gift, an opportunity to love, learn, and grow. And in the end, when the time comes to step through the veil again, I will do so without fear, knowing that I am only returning home. 10. Final reflections. As I look back on the years that have passed since my near-death experience, I feel deep gratitude for every moment, every challenge, and every opportunity for growth that I have been given. The path has not always been easy, but each step has brought me closer to realizing the purpose for which I chose to return. One of the most important lessons I've learned is that personal transformation is an ongoing process. There is no end point, a moment in which we can say, "That's it. Now I am enlightened." Each day brings new opportunities to apply the truths I have learned, to deepen my understanding, and to expand my capacity to love. I realize that the real challenge is not in having a transcendental experience, but in living these truths on a daily basis, amidst the complexities and challenges of earthly life. It's easy to feel connected and loving when you're immersed in divine light. It's much harder, and much more important, to maintain that connection and love when you're facing conflict, pain, and disappointment. Over the years, I have seen many people go through their own spiritual awakening journeys. Some had experiences similar to mine. Others came to these truths through completely different paths. What I realized is that it doesn't matter so much how we get there, but what we do with that knowledge. One of the greatest joys I have experienced is seeing the seeds of consciousness I planted begin to sprout and blossom in the lives of those around me. Seeing someone go from a state of fear and separation to one of love and connection is as big a miracle as anything I've experienced on the other side. I also learned the importance of balance. Although my experience has shown me realities beyond the physical world, it has also taught me to deeply value this earthly existence. Each experience here, whether joyful or painful, is a unique opportunity for growth and evolution. One of the questions I've heard most over the years is, "Why you? Why were you chosen to have this experience and return?" The truth is that I don't see myself as someone special or chosen. I believe we all have the potential to access these greater truths. My experience was just a way of awakening to something that is already within each of us. If there is one message I would like to leave with those who read my story, it is this: you are more than your physical body, more than your earthly experiences, more than your fears and limitations. You are an eternal and beloved expression of divine source, here to experience, learn, and grow. It is not necessary to have a near-death experience to awaken to this truth. Wisdom is all around us and within us, waiting to be recognized. It's in the smile of a stranger, in the hug of a loved one, in the whisper of the wind through the trees. It's in every act of kindness, every moment of connection, every moment of gratitude. As I approach the end of this narrative, I feel a deep peace. I know that one day I will return to that realm of light and love that I briefly experienced. But until then, I fully embrace this earthly journey with all its joys and challenges. Each day is a new opportunity to live the truths I have learned, to be a conduit for divine love, and to help others awaken to their own divine nature. My near-death experience showed me that there is no end to the spiritual journey. Even after we leave this physical plane, we continue to evolve, learn, and grow. And so, I end this narrative not with a final point, but with reticence, because the story continues, eternal and infinite like the love itself that permeates all existence.